it all ties together, our habitats, our rare plants, and plants, potentially going extinct. We don't want that to happen. And I believe the uh, the state of California said that they would not allow any species to go extinct in California. But we are actively working on that. We don't want that to happen. And if a listing of a rare plant has to change, we will work on that and put in the petitions. And we have a whole team that's dedicated to that.
This episode is brought to you in part by our sponsor, Tidal Influence, a Californian ecological consulting firm who proudly supports environmental education and all of the diverse conservation efforts that Pelecanos works to highlight. Visit their website at tidal.influence.com to learn more about what they do to conserve our coastal resources and how you can get involved. Hello everyone and welcome to Pelecanos. Pelecanos is a nonprofit organization focused on sharing the movement that is and has been happening in the conservation field. Now this is Conservation Conversations, our long-form documentary-style show that highlights the people and organizations that are making it their purpose to grow the conservation field and to show that people have, and still are, making monumental differences in our world with intentional change. Head over to pelecanos.org to find all of our episodes and more. In this episode of Conservation Conversations, we talk to Cris Sarabia, the president of the California Native Plant Society and an inspiring community leader in Southern California. Now, California is one of the world's 36 biodiversity hotspots. It has more native plant species than any other state in the U.S., and an entire web of life that depends on those plants. It has something really special that is worth our protection and love. So CNPS is dedicated to that. They do their work through conservation, education, gardening, plant science, and even a publishing arm. They have more than 10,000 members and 35 volunteer chapters across the state and in Baja. So wherever you live, you can get involved locally in issues that truly matter globally. Native plant conservation is directly tied to and impacted by some of the biggest environmental issues of our time. It's a really exciting way to make a difference. Now enjoy our conversation with Cris. And I know you wear a lot of hats, so if you can kind of talk about all the different organizations you're involved with and your role with each of them.
Yeah, my name's Cris Sarabia, and I'm the board president of the California Native Plant Society. What else? I'm the vice president of our local South Coast chapter out here in Los Angeles of the California Native Plant Society. I'm also the conservation director with the Palos Verdes Peninsula Land Conservancy. And what else? Co-founder of Flora y Tierra, which is a community space here in Long Beach, California. And we hold a lot of events here. I also work with Greywater Action, doing education, bilingual education. And then a bunch of other random stuff that I work on for fun with master gardeners and different groups in the community.
So shifting over to California Native Plant Society, if you can do this, do you mind kind of give me the rundown or like a synopsis of what CNPS does and kind of what their role is in the state?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot because CNPS does a lot. And so CNPS, the California Native Plant Society, the mission is to conserve California native plants and their natural habitats, increasing understanding, appreciation, and the horticultural use of native plants. And so that's one sentence trying to really pack in so much. And so I'll try to kind of unravel that in some of the more important points of the org. But before I do that, I'll mention that, we have 35 chapters throughout the state. So these are regional chapters that cover basically every corner of California, and not just California, but into Baja California. The Native Plant Society is focused on the California Floristic Province, and so that doesn't stop at the border; it continues south. And so, a couple years back, a Baja chapter was started that includes that. And so we have that chapter. We also have a specialty chapter that deals with bryophytes. And so that covers the whole state because we have bryophytes throughout the state. And so I think that's an interesting chapter. But otherwise, you can see that we're not just a org that is based out of some central location. We're spread throughout the state with over 10,000 members and volunteers that keep an eye out on their corner of California, make sure, plants are being conserved, protected, not destroyed. They're always on the lookout for rare plants or any interesting habitat or projects, projects such as horticulture projects. So a lot of our members teach classes or workshops for their local communities. And along those horticultural components is the landscaping component. And so we're really heavily invested in pushing California native plants for landscaping, either in a private residence and all the benefits that come with that, right? But also in municipal projects, such as right-of-ways or city parks or things like that. I'm sure a lot of the listeners of this podcast understand the value of native plants and the habitat value for pollinators and just everything that comes with it. So we're really invested in that component, as well as all the science that backs that up, but also that protects all these different plant communities and rare plants and on and on and on. And so, we were just talking about the community component, the community support component. And so while we don't necessarily do restoration, we are very driven by volunteers and what they're seeing out there and what they can volunteer and support for the CNPS mission, right? So that's kind of the chapter spiel. I would recommend that anybody who isn't a member of CNPS or maybe never heard of CNPS to search out your local chapter and just kind of check in and see what they're doing, because it's usually pretty cool stuff. And there's a spot for everyone, from kids who want to go out on a hike, want to learn how to draw plants or ID plants or cook with plants, to maybe you're a really seasoned botanist that wants to go out on a rare plant treasure hunt and learn to key out certain features of a rare plant, or wants to give input on maybe a CEQA document, to protect an area of land that may be threatened.
As you know, as we've talked about, the whole idea behind this organization and this podcast is that we like to highlight the people in the organizations doing the good work to make sure that the plants are still there, the animals are thriving, because all you ever hear on the news is how terrible everything is, but then they don't ever show the other side, that there's hundreds or if not thousands of people that are working hard to protect or to conserve or to get back habitat. And so looking at the website here, the cnps.org, in the programs page, it talks about conservation, their publications, education, rare plant science, gardening, and vegetation science. So that's a huge variety of things that one organization can do. So if you don't mind, you kind of already talked about the native landscaping aspect, but if you want to kind of go into the programs and how CNPS how it has and will make a real impact in California.
Yeah, I'll jump around and feel free to ask if you want me to expand on anything, because there's so much going on. So I'd say within the conservation program, some of the bigger projects we're working on are, the Important Plant Areas initiative. we call it the IPAs, and it's a really cool program. We've actually had a lot of events at breweries, and we call them the IPAs for IPAs. But what it does is it brings together different experts from different regions, to come together and give their input on in important plant areas that they recognize for their region. And so what we're trying to do is create some type of conservation index for plants using GIS software, and basically collecting the data for all these areas from the experts and prioritizing which areas should be protected. It's kind of complicated in the sense where you're running models of which areas are probably the most important due to the amount of species, rare species, how intact the habitat is, if there's corridors running through there that connect, to other regions. And so, in a sense, the important plant areas is bringing all this data that we have that we know that is important, and creating almost a hierarchy of where we need to protect, what areas are most important. This is kind of in response to maybe people in California government asking, well, which areas are most important? Which areas should we be protecting? And, not really having an answer of like, well, this place, we think this place is really important. I mean, we kind of have an idea. So we're using science and data to really provide that answer, so that as projects come down the line, we know which areas are sensitive. We have that data and we have it on record, and it can easily be submitted to protect an area that is very important. We're trying to make sure that habitat value and making sure people understand the connection between, species of animals and plants, and what role individual plants play with providing habitat value, redundancy, pollinator habitat, all these things. We're trying to make sure that isn't left out of that process by using these IPAs. And so you can actually access the database, how it's been completed so far on the website, and get some more info. And if you're a plant expert, you can be part of the process.
And then one thing I kind of wanted to add to the IPAs program, you kind of mentioned it already, but the importance of that, knowing the background, or knowing the kind of baseline data at the very least, is huge. Because if you think about, before, was it 60 years ago when CNPS was put together, or when this movement started to happen, like say in 1900, if they wanted to build a new city in Southern California or anywhere in California, they just go, cool, go ahead, And then now with these databases, we can kind of go, actually, let's build it this way, or let's build it in a smarter way, or let's not build there, but build here, or design it in a way because there's rare plants here, and it's just to add a little context at how important that is for any kind of development, because especially Southern California is just so overdeveloped that you don't even think about that. But that doesn't mean that Northern California can't be developed the same way it is here. So it's a really important program.
It is. I would say that it all ties together, our habitats, our rare plants, and plants, potentially going extinct. We don't want that to happen. And I believe the state of California said that they would not allow any species to go extinct in California. But we are actively working on that. We don't want that to happen. And if a listing of a rare plant has to change, we will work on that and put in the petitions, and we have a whole team that's dedicated to that. Something interesting with CNPS is that we're a collaborative group, right? There's no way we can handle all this information or these projects, or working on documents of CEQA or petitions for federal listing of species. We work with other groups that may already be working on this stuff, and we work together to get these things done that are important for conservation. And so I think that's important, collaboration, on many levels is important, because it comes in, and that comes back to the community component, right? People have to be invested for things to work, for things to be effective.
The scope of work that CNPS does in the state of California is so large that you can't do it on your own. The reach that you guys have, I think how important it is that you guys work with small organizations, large organizations, and everyone in between to all work in the same direction. And it's super important to have a larger nonprofit entity like CNPS to kind of, direct people in the right direction, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, there's no other way with the statewide group. And I think, most people in conservation in California know about CNPS because we're volunteer driven, and people are of different walks of life are involved in CNPS. And so I think that's that's kind of to our benefit, right? We have people at San Diego Zoo. We just have people throughout the state in different areas of expertise that care about native plants, right? And that could be from someone running a, regional water department, but it's also photographers, it's also landscapers, it's gardeners, it's scientists, pathogen scientists, it's on and on and on. And so I think that's what makes it unique, is that any nexus of native plants, we're kind of open to it, which is kind of dangerous, right? Because we get overloaded with the type of work we do. But if it's beneficial to native plants, then why wouldn't you aspire to do it, to protect those native plants, right?
You mentioned, we bring people together over beer, cider, cookies, whatever. One thing you kind of forget about is that every single one of those is composed of plants. The cookies is wheat, and chocolate's a plant, and beer is hops, all those kind of stuff. And those are all native to somewhere. They may not be California native plants, but there's no questioning how important plants are. But then when you look at your local community and you try to make that connection between your local native plants.
I agree. And I think we have these really good presentations we do that are short and they're interactive. It's one of these where it's like, what is this? What is that? You're not telling people, but you're asking them, well, what is that? And most people have an answer. It may not be correct, but it's leading in the right direction. And so, yeah, like you said, if you ask someone, well, what is this made out of? And they start to go down that rabbit hole, and then you bring them in and say, well, this is why we're doing what we do. And most people respect that, and it's cool to get that respect, those smiles of people are like, oh, I get it now. They may not want to dedicate, all their weekends to helping to pull weeds and plant native plants, but they're probably going to support you, right? And if they see you on the street, they're going to remember that you were talking about native plants, and they're going to remember what you told them. And that's what you want. You want that interactiveness part of it, and just make sure that it ties into their everyday life, where they're drinking cider and they remember what cider comes from.
Yeah, I think that, and the larger scale education programs that NPS and other organizations are doing, you would hope that when you learn those things, you take that next step, and you remember it when you're voting on things, or you're thinking about your community and how, if they're trying to, like we said, build a new city, you kind of remember that native plants are a thing to begin with, but then also that they're important and all the reasons they're important. That's the hope, is that you take that next step. So I guess that leads into how did you kind of talked about how you're trying to get other people into native plants, and so how did you start in this field? Did you grow up in an area full of native plants and just loved it, or did you have to kind of go find them?
Yeah, no, I did. I grew up in Southeast LA in Bell Gardens. There was no native plant parks there. I would go sneak off to the river, and there was plants there. I didn't know what a native plant was, but I knew that there was frogs and snakes and little critters, you know, on those plants. And so I'd spend a lot of time messing around looking for those, right? To just, you know, average kid just messing around in the dirt, in the weeds, digging holes. I didn't really get into any of that when I was young. We would go camping, go to, you know, Big Bear and hang around the trees, and beautiful, right? You get that serenity, that potentially, I mean, it was, maybe that's why I really enjoy being out in the wild, and native plants is it brings kind of joy to my heart or whatever, right? I make that connection with just kind of beauty and aesthetics and things like that. I think it was when I got my first car, I would throw all my friends in the car and we'd drive. I just drive north, and I'd drive up into the mountains or into the hills, try to find a dirt road, mess up the car pretty bad, but go out to these areas that were just kind of open, nobody was there, and just hang out with my friends and enjoy the sunset. And I think that's when I really started to appreciate more the you know, these wild areas that weren't just dirt roads or dirt lots, but that there was plants there and kind of the beauty there. I started to kind of go down that rabbit hole, and it is a rabbit hole, because once you're in, you're in. Yeah, working with different groups. I think you interviewed Eric Zahn in Tidal Influence, and so they really opened that portal into the native plant world pretty heavily. That, you know, that's when I started to hear Latin names of plants. And, you know, I had kind of heard those terms in college, but it didn't stick, right? It was just kind of like, whatever, I'm just pushing through and trying to get a good grade in class. And but I didn't really relate it to my life until I started to do nature walks with Taylor and Eric. And I was like, whoa, this is cool, you know? Like, this doesn't have to be scholarly per se, like it can be enjoyable as well. There was that shift where you start to learn Latin for plants, you know, where your brain doesn't quite, at least for me, I wasn't able to pick up on that third language. And then when I did, I was like, whoa, okay, what's up? You know, and I remember being told, like, say hi to the plants in their name as a way to learn. And I don't know if I picked that up from those two guys or not, but it worked. And so in a sense, at that point, it threw it into also like a spirituality kind of thing, where maybe they were, you know, connecting with me. Maybe it was all in my head. Whatever it was, I was hooked. I was hooked on that, you know, and every component of this natural world, and really just enjoying it, not entirely as a career, but really just being able to enjoy nature, and understanding the impacts we were making, right? I think, I mean, we were all young, but, you know, a hawk would fly over us and we'd say, yep, like we're doing good work, you know, like this is why we do this kind of stuff. And so it almost gave us more drive to continue, because you'd see these beautiful things and you turn around and see the good work you did, and you'd go back a year later and you'd see the, you know, the habitat you created and what effects it was having on the environment. I think that's what really continues to get me. I was going to say it got me, but I mean, it's a slow process. Various, you know, things, you know, were attributed to getting into native plants, but every day it continues that way. I think it's one of these things where it's hard to get out of it, because you just see the beauty of nature. You see the impacts of having native plants, you know, in a habitat for other species to use. And you see that if you were to lose that, you know, the impacts it would have to the environment, the ecology. I think that's kind of what sticks with me, you know. It's hard to really walk away from this. because you know you're making an impact, right? One plant, you know. I mean, I planted a bunch of native plants in the Parkway. This is a big street I live off of, and I go out and you see, you know, little critters hanging out on these plants that are otherwise you just have concrete, you know, up and down the street. And you see praying mantises hanging out on there because they're waiting for other little insects to show up. And you see monarchs flying through the traffic to get to your milkweed. So yeah, it's kind of hard not to want to plant more and protect more, and you know, yeah, plant one plant here, but then try your best to get a project going where you plant 10,000 of those plants over there and really scale up and really make a huge impact, right? And tell that story to the next generation so that, you know, they can come and do the same thing, and you could retire and really like see that continued progress of you know, restoring nature.
I think that's one of the reasons why, you know, I think you and CNPS are so important. We kind of joke that we look at conservation as almost like a religious mindset, because like once you learn about it, like you said, it's hard to get out of it because you can't turn that off and not think of native plants and that plant should be here, that plant shouldn't be here. You know, your consumption, your energy use, all that, and it's hard to just shut it off. And again, that's why, you know, like I said, people like you and CNPS are so important, is because you're trying to get that mindset into everyone and anyone in California and beyond. And that's, you know, that's the good fight right there.
Yeah, we're trying. I mean, it's a hard fight, right? But I think we're winning. And you see it with COVID, right? You see, you know, there's pros and cons to a lot of people visiting our national parks or our trails. I mean, the trails are getting impacted, but those people they're searching for the same things we found, you know, back then, right? I mean, I hope most of them are, but I do see it. If you talk to people, they're pretty into what they're doing. They're pretty into going out, hiking, smelling the sage, right? Watching the sunset over the ocean, whatever, right? I guess it's a optimistic way to look at what's going on right now. You're getting more and more people out there and connecting to nature.
You know, we talked about, you know, why you and CNPS is so important. And one of the reasons is because, like you said, you were kind of just a normal person. You grew up in Southeast LA, and you then, after 20, 30 years, you became the president of a California Native Plant Society. And so I think, you know, the fact that you are just a normal person, and also the fact that this field is a very white field. It's usually white males. If you look at most of the boards of all the nonprofits that do this kind of work, it's usually older white men. We're starting to see a change, and we're starting to see a need for representation. And, you know, having you as with your background, which you can explain. So if you're comfortable, you might kind of go into why that representation of, you know, women and people of color is so important.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge conversation, right? And you get, yeah, I mean, I have so many thoughts on that. And you see, I'm glad that, you know, things are going the way they're going. In a sense, I'm glad, right? I guess I try to be optimistic in a lot of ways, but things are coming to light, and we're having to confront these issues. And so you see a lot of statements being put out by like Sierra Club and Audubon and CNPS as well, and other groups confronting this structural racism and inequality that has gone on for since the beginning of this, you know, Western conservation field. You know, if the roots of the conservation field in the U.S. are tainted, then the whole tree is going to be tainted, right? It's going to be affected. It's going to grow, you know, deformed, or the fruits of that are not going to be the best fruits. And so we have to treat that tree. We have to treat those roots. We have to work on it, and not just let it continue to grow in the way it's growing. I always, talk about the diversity of plants and the diversity of people, and how these groups that we're involved in have to match the diversity of California. We're a biodiversity hotspot, and not just in plants, but in people. Any group, conservation or not, has to match the demographic to make the right impact. And we have not seen that. There's been different rules in place to affect boards in their male to female ratio, right? And so it's starting to get addressed on the legal end, but we're still not there in components of diversity of people of color. And so it goes back to the roots. It's hard to, you can't just cut the tree off from those roots, because it may not survive. And so you almost have to graft that, right? And I apologize for the metaphor, but I see that metaphor. You almost have to graft new pieces on there. And so it's a process. And so, with the CNPS board, we've been trying to work on it. We are working on it. We have a whole group dedicated to that. We've been talking about this forever, but the action items are what counts. And so we are working to diversify our membership, our boards, our different 35 chapter boards, and then our main board, as well as our staff. And that's really, really hard when you have this field that's just full of old white guys, right? And so we do have new generations coming up, and I think it's important for all of us to mentor those people into our positions, into our roles, into whatever it is that we're working on. I think that's the best way to go about this, is to start to tap those younger people of color on the shoulder and say, hey, do you want to do this in the future? If so, here's how we do it. Let's get to it. And it's really hard work, and it's really easy to not want to do it and just turn around and say, I got other things to do. I don't have time for that. But things have to change, because you see it. You see these. You see the impacts of that lack of diversity. You see those impacts of this monoculture of decision makers. You see that throughout society. You see it throughout our boards. And so what do you get from that? You get stagnant conversations, stagnant ideas. You don't move forward. If you're not matching the demographics of the society. So of course the society is not going to want to support your mission. If you're not thinking like society, right? They're probably not going to create opportunities for women of color, right? Because they don't even get that mindset. They don't even know what's going on.
Right.
And so it's same with the inner city stuff, right? You're not going to get, impacts to the inner city, because these people are not coming from the inner city. So they have no clue what's going on there. It has to change. The change is here. And so, I ask for anybody out there who wants to serve on the board of CNPS to start to get involved, because it's great. It's great to be able to have a voice on what happens and what you want to happen and what impacts you want to occur, based on what you care about, right? And who you represent. And so I represent this community. And so I know what I want to support, right? And I want to be held accountable to what I support. And so I believe we're supporting what the community wants us to support. I hope that makes sense. But for any, people of color out there, or women that may not feel that they're being represented, I would say step up and join us, because that's the only way it's going to happen. we need to do this now. We need to change those demographics. And I know that the people are out there. It's just connecting. We just need to work together to connect and train each other so that we can continue to do good work out there. We want to continue to do impacts, right? And we need new ideas. We need to do things from different angles so that we have better success.
And so I guess along the same lines, and we'll kind of wrap up with this, I've taken enough of your time here, it's always a hard question to ask and answer, but what gives you hope when you're every day you're dealing with contractors and all the stuff that you don't like to do? When you kind of need to take a step back, what is it that gives you hope about why you keep doing this?
You just look at the kids, man. You look at the kids. I keep this postcard on my desk. There's this little kid wrote, I got asked to teach talk about native plants. I think that was it. Just go talk about native plants to a cafeteria, school of children, cafeteria full of children. It was maybe like 200 kids, and it was career day or something. I don't know. I just, went up there, and I don't know what I was talking about. I was just talking nonsense to the kids. I was trying to meet them at their halfway point. And I got all these postcards from them after. And I'm sure, the teacher made them do it. But some of those postcards are crazy. And I was just like blown away, almost like tears in my eyes, where they're just like, wow, like I didn't know you could make lemonade berry out of, this plant. Like I want to do what you do when I grow up. And I'm sure, like I said, a lot of these postcards were the teacher made them write something like that. But some of them were just genuine. And that's kind of what keeps me going, is like, if one of those kids in that cafeteria, has that same drive and decides to pursue conservation, this was a school, 99% of the kids were brown. And so if one of those kids got, stoked on that, that's what keeps me going, because that's my replacement. And we're, we want to train our replacements. We want them to have drive, and that's what we want, and so that kind of keeps me going a lot, that those kids are out there, and that we all have a direct impact on them.
You and CNPS, the work you guys are doing is so important, and it's so important that like you're making it a tenet of the organization that it's for everyone can get involved. So along those lines, where can people get involved if they want to get involved with, any of the organizations that you're involved with?
Yeah, you can get involved with CNPS. You go to the website, cnps.org. You can join, you can be a member, and then you get all the cool stuff in the mail that, starts to tell you stories about native plants, starts to tell you about the events going on. You can do that, but you don't have to be a member. You can just be involved. And so I would go to the CNPS website, go to the chapter map, find your nearest chapter, and then go to their website and see what they're doing and get involved. Just go to their, most of our chapters have these monthly meetings. So go to those meetings. And right now, most of us are doing them in Zoom style. And so you don't even have to leave your house. You can just watch them. You can ask questions. And I'd say, that is one of the easiest ways to get involved with CNPS. And then if you really have drive and you really want to do more impact, then you continue to talk to these people in these boards of your local chapter. They're the people who are the most involved, and they want support. They want to work with people. And so that's one way with the CNPS. CNPS actually has a lot of different social media. So whatever you're on, you could get, tied in some way. Leave a comment, send a direct message, whatever it is. Someone is bound to answer you, because most of us are nice. I would say all of us are nice. Maybe there's one or two out there that are cranky, but they're probably still nice if you start to talk about plants. They probably just don't like people. But if it involves plants, they're going to get really stoked on it. And all the other groups also have their websites, graywateraction.org. It's a great statewide group as well. And it ties into native plants, saving water. You can use gray water with native plants and really make an impact to your footprint and be sustainable at the same time. And Flora y Tierra as well. We have an Instagram, and you can see the different events, the different projects we're working on here in Long Beach, California. And if you're near us, you can get involved in some way.
Well, thank you again, Cris. I really appreciate your time here. I know it's with all these organizations you're involved with, it's kind of hard to find time for you. So I really appreciate it.
Right on, Austin. Thanks for having me. And yeah, thanks for everything. Pelicanus is doing great work, so definitely supportive of all the podcasts you guys are putting out there.
Thank you again to Cris for talking with us, and special thanks to Liv O'Keefe of CNPS as well. Especially if you're in California, please look into CNPS's programs if you're looking to get involved in your natural community. Producers on this episode are Austin and Taylor Parker. Music for this episode was provided by A Picture Book. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, and thank you again for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time.